Hey everybody, and welcome to another instalment of board games hitting my table. So in this series I take a look at all of the board games that I've been playing over the last couple of weeks. This episode covering the first half of April 2023. Now before I get started on the games, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer when it comes to purchasing board games here. And if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get cracking, and we're going to start with a two-player game of Darwin's Journey. So a relatively hot game at the moment, been a long time coming. It's the latest Simone Luciani and Nestor Mangoni game, and it's a medium to heavyweight worker placement game that I have reviewed, so if you want comprehensive thoughts then please check out my review. And I did review it very positively. Played it again since, of course, and it's still amazing. It's such a solid game. I love the way that you can tailor your workers by putting these sills on them to make them better at certain parts on the board. Now, I haven't won this game yet, so I'm not too good at it. This game, most recent game I had, was a lot closer than usual. I kind of fell short when it comes to this kind of small area control part of the game, which gives you loads of follow-up kind of bonuses and actions that you wouldn't normally get. And I think maybe that cost me quite dearly because I kind of neglected that for the first couple of turns. But I did make up some room by increasing my endgame multipliers that you get by researching these different kind of species, and that multiplies by another kind of track you're climbing. It's just a really well put together game, surprisingly intuitive by how much is going on here, and it's a lot of fun, and you can play it relatively quickly at two players, which is always a nice thing. So that is Darwin's Journey. It's definitely staying strong. I played a two-player game, because this is only a two-player game, of Wizards of the Grimoire. So this is a game that's not widely known about, I suppose, but it was sent to me by the designer. I have just recorded a review of this one, so I want to be a little bit reserved about what I think of it. But if you watched the most recent episode of Corporate Cardboard, you might know that I did share some very positive thoughts on it. But this is a two-player only dueling game where you are building up a small tableau of these magic cards and then basically trying to eliminate or deplete the health of your opponent. Normally that would be a bit of a red flag for me. I'm not keen on those styles of games, but this one is a lot more kind of about efficiency, and it has that more Euro aspect to it rather than a destructive take that aspect to it or feel to the game. Some of the synergies in this game is absolutely brilliant, and every single game I've had of this has come right down to the wire, created some very tense moments. And now, I'm playing this game with my mum at the moment. This is not normally the kind of game we'd play, and it's probably our favourite thing to play right now. So, that's all I'm going to say for now. Check out my review, and because it is coming out very soon. So that is Wizards of the Grimoire. Also played a two-player game of Photograph. So this is a very tense card game that's very difficult to do well at least in my experience. I'm not good at this game either. It's very difficult to play this efficiently, as you're drafting cards from this grid, then playing them out in runs in their colours or suits. But you have to play them in order, otherwise you suffer negative points. But doing that is so difficult because you can only play cards as in like the first card you get into your hand is kind of the first card out. So it kind of goes on this conveyor belt system, and you cannot reorganize them, but you only get one chance to move one card per round, which is not really enough to do well. And you have to kind of be prepared to suffer some negative points here. It's so uncomfortable. I described it as. I have reviewed this one. I haven't uploaded it yet, but it's one of those games that falls into the bracket of a game like Arboretum, where it's so deceptive because it looks like a simple, pleasant, breezy game, where in reality it is absolutely agonizing, but good. It's a very good game. That is Photograph. Speaking of two-player already, I played a two-player game of District Noir. This is another two-player only game, a kind of a drafting game as you're playing cards out in between you and your opponent. And these cards are going to come in different types. They're going to come in these suits like this, which means that there's 8 8s in the deck, 7 7s, and so on. And if you have the majority of them at the end of the game, then you'll get 8 points if you get the 8s. There's also just simple plus and negative points as well. And there are these cards here, which are kind of a sudden death mechanism, where if you get all 3, you'll automatically win. Now, I played this, and it was quite a funny game, really, because Normally with games like this, if you're going to win one suit, you're going to give up another one or two. That's just the way it goes. But I actually happened to win every single suit in this game, which is kind of unheard of. So my mum just had some really terrible luck, or just didn't play too well. But we had a laugh at it. It's just a wonderful two-player game, and I'm sure this is getting a reprint this year in Europe. So check that out. Or if you like your very tight, succinct two-player tug of war drafting style games, then District Noir is such a solid choice. We played a 3-player game of Vasco da Gama. So if you weren't aware, Vasco da Gama is a game that I had many years ago. I bought it, played it a few times, and then I thought, I've kind of seen that mechanism now, and then I ended up culling it for my collection. But I always had this itch to get it back into my collection because I love one of the mechanisms in this game. It's really fascinating. And obviously I bought it back, and now I played it again. And, I had such a good time with it. It's such an interesting game where I suppose at its core, it's so simple as you're just drafting these crew members, you're filling them up, or basically you're using them as crew to these boats, then you're sending these boats off to get points. That's pretty much the gist of the game. But the way everything is held together is through this amazing initiative system where you are taking these tokens and then placing that with your workers on the board. And the lower the token value means the better the initiative, so that you'll get first priority. But that comes with a risk because randomly there is this pawn that goes up and down the tracks here, which might end up costing you more money the better the initiative you take. So it does have this real kind of push and pull. And sometimes if you really need to go first, which might happen, then you need to be willing to maybe lose a lot of money or pay quite a bit to do that. Love that part of the game. There's also some cool powers and stuff you can draft which are very useful, such as giving you passive points, or giving you extra even worker placements, or giving you these kind of neutral crew members. All this is well worth having. You can even have many of them at once to create a really kind of strong engine, I suppose, and there's good competition for them. Now, despite me absolutely having a blast playing this game, and we all did, it's one of those games that once you've played it, it feels like you do not need to play it for quite some time again. So I forgot that, but the first time I culled it from my collection, I forgot why I did that. And now it's all kind of fit into place again. So despite me loving it, this one, I think the shelf life and the longevity is quite low. It's kind of a bit of a one-trick pony. And once you've wrapped your head around that mechanism and seen what it has to offer, you've kind of seen everything. So if you want a kind of a one-shot, or you like games that you will play once, maybe leave it a couple of years before you play it again, then this is a great option. But I think I'm going to lean towards culling it again after this one, because I feel like every time I play this, even though the gaps have been huge between them, I've had the highest of highs, and there's not really much to unravel or left to discover with the game. So really recommend it. It's a solid Euro, but again, that longevity and the shelf life is very low on Vasco da Gama. I played a 3-player game of Bali, another game that I played for the first time quite recently. I think it featured on my last 10 games ranked video. This one is a simple drafting game, a bit of a commodity speculation game, as you are taking these cards from these rows, building them up in front of you, a little bit of an engine, and then collecting these different resources which will score points based on how popular those cards have been sacrificed using another mechanism, essentially. I had only played this at 2 players, and now I played it with more, because I was quite optimistic that it was going to be a lot better with more players, because again, there's more variables in terms of who's putting stuff in the piles. And I don't think it's that much better at 3 or 4 players. It's still a good game. This is, I would consider this kind of a quintessential near miss for me. It's solid, it's fun, there's nothing really wrong with it, but it does lack that certain spark. So yeah, I think this is one of those games that's good. It's a quality game, but ultimately it doesn't really stand out from the pack of so many games out there. And I think I have recorded a review of this one as part of a series of reviews. I played a 3-player game of the Tower of Babel. This was a game, again, that I played for the first time very recently. It came really high on my top, my 10 of the month, whatever it was, 10 games ranked. This is a fascinating Randy Knizia game, as you are collecting these cards to build these monuments. And essentially you are using these cards not only from yourself but from the other players as well. And if you accept their offers, then you'll compete for area majorities on the different wonders, which will give you points at certain points in the game. But if you reject their offers, they get pure victory points for doing that. And there's a lot of nuance and kind of delicate balancing on how you want to use those cards in your hand. Again, another game, I think I released this as part of a 3-part video with 3 games being reviewed, this being one of them. And I love it. This game has flown up my rankings flew up my rankings since the last time I spoke about it. I'm in love with it. I think it's fantastic. That is the Tower of Babel. Also played a 2-player game of Bora Bora. So I played this one with somebody who hadn't played it before, and you know, this is one of my favourite Stefan Feld games. A good reminder as to why that is the case, because I love everything going on in this game. It's really fascinating. It feels like a true Feldian design, as you are placing these dice on these different actions, kind of trying to complete these short-term and long-term objectives, making sure you at least complete one each turn to make sure you're staying up with your opponent. You're buying this jewellery, which will score you points. You're utilising these helpers, which can combine together and make you have stronger bonus actions. A real point salad game here. I think we had a very, very close game. I believe I competed quite heavily on this kind of small little area majority part of the game where if you have most presence you get more points, and as the game goes on that even ramps up further. And yeah, I think it went quite well for me. I think I might just squeeze the win, but I'm just glad that both me and my opponent we really enjoyed the play of it, and it's just one of the best Feld games out there. If you can't get a copy of this one, then it is being reprinted soon as part of the Stefan Feld collection called Cuzco. But those games are very extortionately priced, so be prepared to part with your cash if you want a copy. But hey, if you love your Feld games, it's worth it. This game is fantastic. So that is Bora Bora, one of my favourite Feld games. Something quite a bit different to Bora Bora. I played I think it was a 2-player game. It might have been a 3-player game. No, it was a 2-player game of Coloretto. This has a really good 2-player variant where instead of having I think it's 4 cards per column, you have 3 columns. One can have 1 card, one can have 2 cards, and one can have 3 cards. And then what you're doing is you're either putting these chameleon cards on these columns, or you are taking a column. But you can only score 3 suits of cards, and anything that you take more than that is basically negative points, which is obviously not a good thing. It's just one of the best fillers out there. Again, scales remarkably well. Takes about 10 minutes to play, and there's nothing really negative I can say about it. It's basically an essential for me. I think if you like your filler games and you want something clever but still very easy to play, then Coloretto is a banker. So played a 2-player game of Seeland. This is a very underrated Wolfgang Kramer co-design, as you are basically trying to fill the map here of these tiles as well as your windmills. And what you're trying to do is you're placing your windmills on these windmill tiles and then trying to surround them with these different kind of terrains, I suppose, or these different types of tulips. And as soon as you do, you're going to score the points on all those tulips. And if you score all the 3 different types, then you get some bonus points. If you don't score, if you score no variation at all, as in having 3 of the same type, then you score nothing. And you can, of course, use that to mess with your opponents because you are often sharing tiles or sharing tiles adjacent between your windmills. It has this awesome money system, as you are basically using this track of coins. And the more money you spend, it basically means you run out of coins if your opponent isn't spending much. So you're always kind of tethered, almost like with a chain, to your opponent on what you can spend. And it's a money mechanism that I've never seen before, and it works exceptionally well. Now, I do prefer this at 3 players. I think there's a bit more opportunity to bounce off the other players and sneak into gaps and capture opportunities. But it still does work fine at 2. There's also quite an interesting mechanism where if you have a particularly good scoring, you can put like a marker on the score track to say, this is how many points I scored in one outing, basically. And that kind of is like a top 3 or 4 rankings at the end of the game, which will give you some bonus points as well. So it's a good idea that it's cool. It's a cool mechanism that you can decide when to use that chip to say this is what I've done, and hopefully that'll be in the top 3 or 4 best outputs of points during the game. A really nice one, very good, very simple rules, very digestible, but it works well and some good decisions here, and I continue to enjoy it. So that is Seeland. And also played another older game here with Arcadia. I played this at 2 players as well, the first time I've done that. And I was a little bit apprehensive as to how it was going to go at 2 players, because a bit like Seeland, I think this is a game that benefits from that third wild card in order to make more opportunities and to, just to spice the game up a bit more. But I was actually really pleasantly surprised to see how it did work at 2 players. As you're placing these polyomino tiles on the board, you are trying to surround the polyomino tiles in order to get the coins on them. And there's 4 different kind of currencies in the game. And at certain points in the game, or there's kind of 4 opportunities in the game to cash your coins in to get points or convert them to points. But that is based on a dynamic market in the center here. So if you maybe collect loads of gold coins, you might want to invest in trying to make the gold coins as valuable as possible and then cash them out before that kind of gets tanked in its value. Very interesting and very puzzly. There's some cool little moves and traps you can do here. And again, I think it was another really tight game, and just a solid one that's, again, it feels like a throwback, but it still feels fresh and new. And considering this uses a kind of, a polyomino mechanism, that's not something I say terribly often, because I know that that's been done to exhaustion, really. So that is Arcadia. Again, continue to enjoy. So lots of positive thoughts on these games. The final game that I've played that is not actually here physically, because it's a friend's copy, is that I had a chance to revisit Kingsburg. So I think Kingsburg was one of the first kind of Euro games that I played, and it was the first game that I played that used workers in a dice as workers in a Euro game. You're basically rolling dice and using them to trigger characters, which will give you resources or points. Then you're using those resources in order to build buildings. Unfortunately, I continued to roll really low throughout the whole game, which I think is a bit of a shame about the game, is that if you do roll badly, you will probably lose. And of course, if you roll well, you'll probably win, because the output of the higher value characters is simply better. So there's not really a way to counteract that. There are a few mitigation tools you can use by investing in these things in your player sheets. And I'm not terribly experienced with that game. I've played it probably 5-6 times, but that was many, many years ago. And I wasn't quite sure, I didn't commit or stick to a strategy or a certain type of building to go for. So maybe I should have done that beforehand and stuck to the plan, where I was kind of just going on, acting very tactically, and that didn't really pay off for me, and I ended up getting absolutely annihilated. But it was fine. It's not a terribly long game. It is very luck dependent for a Euro, but it's got a certain charm to it. So that is Kingsburg. So that's all the games that I've been playing. Nice variation here. Got to play some old favourites, such as Bora Bora, and some new favourites as well, such as Darwin's Journey, and new old favourites like the Tower of Babel. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.